It's wonderful to be here in South Africa with the Prime Minister on the ground for the G20, an institution that Canada actually helped to form under the leadership of Prime Minister Paul Martin. The Prime Minister is just back from the UAE, where he secured $70 billion of investment for Canada's national projects, clean energy, including AI, as well as healthcare. The G20's themes of solidarity, equality, and sustainability are very important, and Canada looks forward to ensuring that we are fulfilling the work that this G20 multilateral conference aims to achieve. And in particular, our participation aims to ensure that we are maintaining that influence over global issues, including global economic issues, and we're promoting Canada as a trusted partner and financial innovator by strengthening our multilateral and our bilateral relationships. And we thank South Africa for hosting us here today. Aussi en français, peut-être je pourrais commencer par dire que le Premier ministre et moi sommes ici sur le terrain et nous sommes très contents d'être ici. Par exemple, le G20, ça veut dire 75% du commerce international, 85% du PIB mondial. Donc c'est une organisation très importante pour tout le monde, surtout pour nous aussi. Et notre participation vise à influencer les enjeux économiques mondiaux. Nous sommes ici pour participer dans les rencontres multilatérales et aussi bilatérales. Et aussi, je voudrais remercier mes homologues et le pays de l'Afrique du Sud pour nous accueillir ici aujourd'hui pour cette conférence.
Can we ask you about your opinion of Donald Trump's peace plan? And obviously leaders, including the Prime Minister, sort of had an ad hoc meeting. And I wonder if you could give us some color of what came out of that meeting.
Thank you for that question on Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine is always top priority for us in terms of our foreign policy. And so the Prime Minister in his meetings was very much focused on ensuring that our foreign policy priorities vis-a-vis Ukraine are met. And those, to be specific, are to ensure a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, to ensure that the security guarantees are in place, and also to make sure that Ukraine is at the table and that its core interests, its sovereignty, for example, its territorial integrity, for example, are protected. And as I sometimes say, Ukraine should be at the table, not on the table.
The leaders issued a joint statement saying that Trump's plan needs additional work. Why is that?
Well, let's go back to the core values that drive the foreign policy of our country vis-a-vis Ukraine, and that foreign policy rests on the territorial integrity of Ukraine in particular, and the respecting of the geographical boundaries. And so that's one example. As you know, the plan is complex and has numerous items, and it's my understanding, I wasn't in the meeting myself, it's my understanding that the leaders undertook some discussion of that, but that there will be a coalition of the willing meeting in the short term to further discuss.
Is there any way that that Ukraine can take the deal as it is? Like, is that even in the realm of possibility?
So what Canada has consistently said in terms of our foreign policy is that these decisions relating to Ukraine rest with Ukraine. And in particular, let's go back to first principles. If we are continually saying that we have to respect the rule of law and that Ukraine is a sovereign country and that territorial integrity is fundamental, then the natural extension of those three principles is that Ukraine must be making decisions for its own future in terms of its own territorial integrity, in terms of its boundaries, in terms of its people.
Donc, je vous écoute, Mme Anand. Pour vous, là, le plan de Donald Trump n'est pas acceptable, finalement.
Mais comme j'ai dit,
Oui ou non, c'est acceptable.
je n'étais pas dans la
Non,
rencontre,
mais vous l'avez vu,
mais c'est le
plan
plan.
américain de M. Trump pour l'Ukraine qui ne respecte pas l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine, qui doit donner des régions à la Russie. Pour vous, c'est inacceptable, ça.
C'est une matière de s'assurer qu'il y a le paix pour l'Ukraine, qu'il y a la souveraineté pour l'Ukraine, qu'il y a une géographie qu'on peut respecter. Donc, ce n'est pas les décisions canadiennes, ce n'est pas les décisions de n'importe qui, sauf Ukraine. Donc, on doit entendre les mots de l'Ukraine.
Mais il a dit que c'était pas acceptable, Zelensky.
On doit continuer de travailler avec les partenaires européens, par exemple. Et ça, c'était le but de la conversation entre le Premier ministre et les leaders européens aussi.
Minister, can you just comment on whether it's been easier or more difficult to have this and other conversations here at the G20 without Donald Trump present or any Americans?
So we are in a moment where the global trading order is becoming completely realigned and where the geopolitical environment is also volatile. This is a moment, therefore, where Canada is utilizing every opportunity, multilaterally and bilaterally, to ensure that our interests are asserted, not only in terms of our economic robustness domestically, but also in terms of our core values and the values that we will continue to stand
En français, en français.
Juste sur l'Ukraine, par exemple, je veux juste comprendre, c'est parce que là, dans le plan américain, il y a des régions qui seraient données à la Russie. Quand vous dites qu'il faut garder l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine, non?
Toujours.
OK. Donc, pour vous, ce que M. Trump propose,
Mais-
ça ne fonctionne pas.
Mais on sait, et on doit être réaliste ici, on sait que ça c'est un plan complexe, très complexe, et aussi on doit continuer d'avoir ces conversations-là entre les autres leaders européens avec des autres alliés partenaires de l'Ukraine. Donc, je ne veux pas être ici d'être seulement dit que ça c'est une matière noire et blanc. C'est une matière de travailler avec nos alliés, comme le Premier ministre a fait cet après-midi, et il va continuer de faire ça. Et comme j'ai dit, ils veulent avoir une autre rencontre avec la Coalition of the Willing pour continuer leur conversation là-dessus. Dylan.
On Africa, our special envoy for Africa said it's not just about a lack of funding in the Africa strategy, but that people at GAC don't even use the word Africa. We just had a cut to the Global Fund. We've had cutbacks to foreign aid. The Prime Minister is here for 48 hours and that's it. There's no other stop. What is your message to African partners who say that we're not taking the continent seriously?
Well, I appreciate that you asked this question. It's so important because this is the first time that the G20 is being held in Africa. So an extremely pertinent moment to ask this question. And in reply, I will first say that Canada is aligned with the themes of the summit: solidarity, equality, and sustainability. I will next say that we have an Africa strategy, and implementation of that strategy is in fact underway. It's also in line with our mandate. We're increasing economic cooperation. We're developing mutually beneficial relationships with reliable partners in Africa, and we're safeguarding Canada's interests. And so I'd like to also mention that there is focus not only on trade and development programs, but also generating mutual prosperity and making sure that that mutual prosperity and economic benefit accrue to Africans and Canadians alike.
Can I ask a
On
question
India,
about Ukraine?
on India, what message does it send that you're going to be meeting with?
I was waiting for a follow-up from Dylan. So
but
Dylan,
I
will
guess
you
I'm
just ask the
I guess
follow-up,
I'm
please?
Can I ask another Africa-related question? Sorry.
But I am wondering, though, like, partners say we're not serious, right? We're cutting back the investment, the budget.
Let me
the
just
budget cuts
follow
in
up on
Asia
that.
and Europe.
Your
I mean,
original question didn't talk about the budget, so let me just answer a question on the budget, because I think it is important in this moment when there is so much in the media about what does our foreign policy vis-a-vis Africa mean, and I want to clarify, okay? So first of all, I want to say that Africa is Canada's largest recipient of international assistance, and our assistance will continue. Over the past 5 years, Canada has invested $4.5 billion in bilateral international assistance programming in Africa to build economies, to support health and education, and to respond to humanitarian needs. So that is the $4.5 billion. That is from the annual budget. But over and above that, you heard earlier today that Canada has made a contribution of $1.2 billion or so over 3 years. That contribution to the 8th Replenishment Summit constitutes 6.4% of the $11.34 billion that were pledged in total. So what I'm trying to say is that Canada's contribution is still meaningful. It is still material. It is still significant. And as I began by saying that the vast majority of the global affairs budget is spent on development assistance, and that is going to continue. And that is in keeping with our core values that I outlined at the United Nations. And I want to clarify that because the Africa strategy, our approach here, our presence here, all speak to the importance of our multilateral and bilateral relationships and our international assistance programs.
Minister, on Sudan.
She asked me first on India, then I'll come back to
On India, what message does it send that you're going to be meeting with Prime Minister Modi on Sunday, on the same day as the Khalistan referendum vote in Canada?
The meeting between Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Modi has been contemplated for some time, and it happens to be falling on the Sunday without an intention to undermine or hurt any other interest domestically. And so I want to say that at the forefront of every conversation is going to be the focus on the law enforcement matters, the law enforcement dialogue, the issues of public safety and security at home. As well, the prime ministers are going to discuss the future collaboration of the two countries following on from my meeting with Minister Jaishankar back in October.
So on Sudan, there's very strong evidence that two Canadian-owned companies, Straight Group and Sterling, are selling military equipment whose end user is the RSF, which, as you know, is slaughtering thousands of people in Darfur. This is clearly a violation of the International Arms Trade Treaty, which Canada is a signatory, adopted into Canadian law. Are you will you investigate, or have you already investigated and decided that there's no problem?
Believe me, I am looking into this very seriously. My understanding is that the products were not manufactured in Canada themselves. My understanding is that this company has some minor footprint in Canada, but most of its operations and the production of these goods are outside Canada. I want to stress a few other points. First, Canada has an arms embargo on Sudan. under both the United Nations Act and the Special Economic Measures Act. And that means that no Canadian companies are permitted to export arms to Sudan directly or through third countries. That means that export or brokering permits are required for Canadian residents seeking to export broker-controlled goods and technologies from Canada. That means that all permit applications for controlled items are reviewed very closely. We've made no extensions to this legal requirement, and anyone who violates the law is going to be held accountable. And finally, the Arms Trade Treaty that Canada is a signatory to, that is Canadian law,
Yeah.
is extremely stringent, and then Canada went over and above what's in the ATT. So I just want to mention that we are monitoring this very closely. We're making sure that the laws that I have just outlined are complied with.
But you said Canadian residents, but in fact, the treaty applies to Canadian citizens and Canadian-owned companies, even if they're totally abroad.
And that is what I am looking at, but making sure that any goods manufactured in Canada, any permits that were issued to Canadian companies are being
So
complied
you don't
with.
care about Canadian citizens
We,
abroad?
and we care about Canadian citizens abroad, of course.
Une dernière question en français sur l'Ukraine. Si les Américains cessent d'appuyer l'Ukraine financièrement comme ils menacent de le faire, est-ce que le Canada et l'Europe sont prêts à augmenter leur aide pour compenser le retrait américain?
Mais c'est le moment ici en Afrique du Sud, pour les conversations là-dessus. C'est difficile pour moi parce que je suis ici comme ministre des Affaires étrangères. Je n'étais pas dans la salle avec d'autres leaders. Et oui, je suis au courant. Mais comme j'ai dit, c'est un plan que nous avons reçu juste, je ne sais pas, c'était jeudi ou...
Parce que dans la déclaration qui a été signée, il y a quand même des critiques.
Et aussi, mais je voudrais renforcer que notre position est claire et était claire, que nous sommes ici comme partenaires de l'Ukraine, nous sommes ici comme pays qui a donné à peu près 22 milliards de dollars pour l'Ukraine avec l'aide humanitaire, militaire et financière. Aussi, nous sommes ici comme un pays qui a entraîné plus de 44 000 soldats ukrainiens. Donc, nous sommes ici comme partenaires de l'Ukraine. Et les principes sont clairs. Les règles internationales sont très importants et doivent guider les conversations de l'avenir de l'Ukraine.
Sort
I've
of
got
along
one
that
last
line,
question. Dernière question, please.
Since it's up to Ukraine what it does ultimately, as you've said multiple times, what can Canada and the other coalition of the willing do to help Ukraine say no to this deal as is, if that's what they want to do?
What we have been doing since February 24th, 2022, together, is to stand strongly with Ukraine for its sovereignty, for the rule of law, and for territorial integrity within Ukraine. That's essentially what President Zelensky has reiterated is important for Ukraine. And respecting Ukraine means respecting its decisions to decide its own future.
Multilateralism.
Last question.
What does today mean for multilateralism? I mean, we actually got some sort of consensus here. The hopes were so low here. Perhaps America's views had to be discounted. I'm just wondering, because at the UN you said we're here for multilateralism. Is today encouraging? Is it sending a message?
Especially the
Or is it a
declaration that was
concern?
issued today, the final declaration?
So the G20 meetings are still ongoing. And what you may not see is that there are multiple conversations happening on the sidelines of the large meeting. The Prime Minister and I just stepped out of the plenary session to move into a bilateral meeting with Turkey, for example. These types of meetings are happening as we speak, and they will continue to happen. It's one of the beauties of the G20 and other multilateral meetings, is that there are the formal and informal conversations and decisions that are taken amongst leaders. And so this is a good day for multilateralism generally, given that it's the first time the G20 has been held in Africa, given that there are not only the members of the G20 in attendance, but also outreach partners, just as we had outreach partners in Niagara at the foreign ministers' ministerial last week in Niagara. So the work is still ongoing here at the G20, and the bottom line is, yes, it is a great day for multilateralism. Thank you.
So-
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all time we have.